What happens when one of America's most beloved astrophysicists reaches his absolute breaking point on live television? Tonight, we're diving into the explosive confrontation that shocked viewers and left everyone asking the same question. How did a routine late-night interview spiral so completely out of control? Neil deGrasse Tyson, known for his calm demeanor and educational approach to science communication, found himself in the most hostile television environment of his career when a host decided to turn what should have been a friendly chat into an intellectual bloodbath. The tension was palpable from the very first question, but nobody could have predicted just how far things would escalate. This wasn't your typical late-night banter. This was a calculated attack on science itself, and when Tyson finally reached his limit, the explosion was unlike anything we've ever seen on television. If you want to see exactly how this train wreck unfolded and witness the moment America's favorite astrophysicist completely lost his composure, make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what happens next. The Late Show's studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy, but there was something different in the air that evening. Stephen Colbert sat behind his desk, shuffling through his notes with an unusually intense focus. His production team had briefed him extensively on their guest, Neil deGrasse Tyson, but tonight's interview wasn't going to follow the typical playbook of respectful scientific discussion that audiences had come to expect. As the cameras rolled and the audience settled into their seats, Colbert's opening monologue carried an edge that regular viewers might have noticed. He made several pointed jokes about scientific elitism and the disconnect between academics and everyday Americans. The audience laughed, but there was an undertone that suggested tonight would be different. When Neil deGrasse Tyson walked onto the stage, he carried himself with his characteristic confidence. The renowned astrophysicist and director of the Hayden Planetarium had appeared on countless shows, written best-selling books, and hosted his own programs. He was accustomed to friendly interviews where hosts genuinely wanted to learn about the cosmos and share that wonder with their audiences. The handshake between Colbert and Tyson seemed normal enough, but as they settled into their seats, something in the host's demeanor shifted. Instead of the warm welcome the guests typically received, Colbert's first question came loaded with an accusatory tone that immediately put Tyson on the defensive. "So, Neil, you've made quite a career out of telling people they're wrong about pretty much everything they believe about the universe. How does it feel to be the guy who's constantly raining on everyone's parade?" Colbert asked, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Tyson paused, clearly taken aback by the hostile framing. "Well, Stephen, I wouldn't characterize my work that way at all. Science isn't about raining on anyone's parade. It's about revealing the incredible beauty and complexity of the universe we actually live in, which I find far more amazing than any fiction we could create." But Colbert wasn't interested in Tyson's measured response. "Right. But you're the guy who told everyone that Pluto isn't a planet anymore. You literally took away a planet from children. How do you sleep at night knowing you've disappointed millions of kids?" The audience laughed, but there was an uncomfortable undertone to the laughter. Tyson had dealt with the Pluto question thousands of times and usually handled it with good humor, but something about Colbert's delivery felt deliberately antagonistic. "The decision about Pluto wasn't made by me personally," Tyson explained, maintaining his composure. "The International Astronomical Union reclassified Pluto based on new criteria that help us better understand the structure of our solar system. We didn't take anything away from children. We gave them a more accurate understanding of the cosmos." Colbert leaned forward, his expression growing more aggressive. "A more accurate understanding? According to who? You and your fellow scientists, sitting in your ivory towers, deciding what the rest of us should believe. Isn't that a bit presumptuous?" The shift in tone was unmistakable now. This wasn't playful television banter. This was a direct challenge to Tyson's credibility and the entire scientific establishment. Tyson's usual smile began to fade as he realized this wasn't going to be the kind of interview he was prepared for. Stephen, science isn't about belief or presumption. It's about evidence, observation, and peer review. The reclassification of Pluto was based on decades of observations and data from the most advanced telescopes and space missions we've ever had. Data that ordinary people can't access or understand, Colbert shot back. So we're just supposed to take your word for it? Trust the experts, right? Isn't that exactly the kind of thinking that got us into trouble in the first place? Tyson's eyebrows raised slightly. He could sense the interview spiraling into territory that had nothing to do with science education and everything to do with broader cultural and political tensions. I'm not sure what you're referring to when you say, got us into trouble. Stephen, scientific literacy has improved human life in countless ways. Has it, though? Colbert pressed, his voice rising slightly. Because it seems like every time scientists make some grand pronouncement, they end up being wrong later. Remember when eggs were bad for you? Remember when coffee caused cancer? Why should anyone trust what you're saying about space when scientists can't even figure out what we should eat for breakfast? The tension in the studio became thick enough to cut with a knife, as Tyson realized he was facing something he had never encountered before on television. This wasn't ignorance or genuine curiosity gone wrong. This was a deliberate ambush designed to undermine not just him personally, but the entire scientific method. His hands, usually animated as he described the wonders of the cosmos, now gripped the arms of his chair. Stephen, you're conflating two completely different things, Tyson said. His voice still controlled, but with a new edge of frustration. Nutritional science deals with incredibly complex biological systems where variables are difficult to control and isolate. Astrophysics deals with fundamental physical laws that we can observe, measure, and predict with extraordinary precision. When I tell you that Mars has 2 moons, that's not an opinion that's going to change next week, based on new dietary guidelines. Colbert wasn't backing down. If anything, Tyson's explanation seemed to fuel his aggression. Oh, so some science is reliable and some isn't. How convenient. And who gets to decide which is which? You? Your buddies at the planetarium? The same scientific community that told us the universe was static until they decided it was expanding, then told us the expansion was slowing down until they decided it was speeding up? The audience was growing noticeably uncomfortable. This wasn't the playful intellectual sparring they had expected. Several people in the front rows exchanged worried glances, and the usual laughter that punctuated Colbert's interviews had become sporadic and nervous. Tyson took a deep breath, clearly, trying to maintain his educational demeanor despite the increasingly hostile environment. Those examples you're citing actually demonstrate the strength of science, not its weakness. When new evidence emerges, we update our understanding. That's how knowledge advances. The scientific method is specifically designed to be self-correcting. Self-correcting, Colbert repeated mockingly. That's a fancy way of saying you were wrong before, and you might be wrong again. So, why should anyone listening tonight believe anything you're telling them about black holes or dark matter, or any of this other stuff that nobody can actually see or touch? Tyson's jaw tightened visibly. His usual patience with scientific misconceptions was being tested in ways he had never experienced. Because we can observe the effects of these phenomena, Stephen. We can measure gravitational waves from black hole collisions. We can observe how dark matter affects the rotation of galaxies. Just because something isn't visible to the naked eye doesn't mean it isn't real or that we can't study it scientifically. Effects, Colbert said dismissively. So you're asking people to believe in invisible things based on other invisible things. How is that different from asking them to believe in unicorns based on hoof prints? The comparison was so scientifically illiterate and deliberately inflammatory that Tyson actually flinched. His composure, carefully maintained through decades of public speaking and media appearances, was beginning to crack. That's not even remotely the same thing, Stephen. We have multiple independent lines of evidence from different instruments, different research groups, different theoretical frameworks, all pointing to the same conclusions. The scientific consensus on these matters is built on reproducible experiments and observations. Consensus? Colbert pounced on the word like a predator sensing weakness. There's that word again. So science is just whatever most scientists agree on. Sounds like politics to me, and we all know how reliable politicians are. Tyson's hands were now clenched into fists. His breathing had become more rapid, and there was a flush creeping up his neck that makeup couldn't entirely conceal. Scientific. Consensus isn't the same as political opinion, Stephen. It's based on evidence that can be independently verified by anyone with the proper tools and training. Anyone with the proper tools and training, Colbert repeated sarcastically. So basically, anyone who's been indoctrinated into your system, anyone who's been trained to think exactly like you do. That's not independent verification. That's groupthink. The audience was now clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the interview. What had started as seemingly playful intellectual sparring had devolved into something that felt more like harassment. Several audience members were shifting in their seats, and the energy in the room had become genuinely tense. Tyson leaned forward in his chair, his voice dropping to a lower register that anyone who knew him well would recognize as a warning sign. Stephen, I've spent my entire career trying to make science accessible to everyone. I've written books, hosted shows, given thousands of lectures, all with the goal of helping people understand the universe we live in. I'm not trying to indoctrinate anyone or exclude anyone from scientific knowledge. But you are excluding them. Colbert pressed relentlessly. Every time you use jargon they don't understand. Every time you cite research they can't access. Every time you dismiss their questions as unscientific, you're building walls. You're creating an us versus them mentality, where scientists are the enlightened elite, and everyone else is just supposed to shut up and listen. Tyson's eyes flashed with genuine anger for the first time in the interview. His voice, when he spoke, carried a sharp edge that his regular audience had never heard before. That is absolutely not what I'm doing, and frankly, I resent the implication. I have dedicated my life to breaking down those exact barriers. The reason I appear on shows like this is to have conversations with people who might not otherwise encounter scientific ideas. Conversations? Colbert laughed harshly. Is that what you call lecturing people about how wrong they are? Because that's what it sounds like to most folks out there. They ask a simple question about whether we really went to the moon, and you launch into some condescending explanation about retroreflectors and Van Allen belts like they're idiots for even asking. The moon landing conspiracy reference was clearly the last straw for Tyson. His face had gone from flushed to pale, and there was a tremor in his voice that suggested he was fighting to maintain any semblance of professional composure. People died to put those retroreflectors on the moon, Stephen. Brave men and women dedicated their lives to one of humanity's greatest achievements. And yes, I will defend that achievement against conspiracy theories and ignorance every single time. There it is, Colbert said triumphantly. Ignorance. That's what you really think of people who dare to question your version of reality. They're not curious, they're not skeptical, they're just ignorant. And you're here to enlighten them, whether they want it or not. Tyson was breathing heavily now, his hands shaking slightly as the full weight of what was happening hit him. This wasn't just an attack on him personally, it was an assault on everything he had worked for throughout his career. Every book he's had written, every lecture he had given, every appearance he had made was being twisted into something ugly and elitist. I have never, ever called anyone ignorant for asking questions, Tyson said. his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Questions are the foundation of science. What I object to is the deliberate spread of misinformation and the rejection of evidence-based reasoning. Evidence-based reasoning, Colbert repeated mockingly. According to you and your colleagues, the same people who benefit from government grants and university positions and book deals based on people believing what you tell them. You have a financial incentive to be right, don't you, Neil? The accusation of financial motivation hit Tyson like a physical blow. His face went completely white, then flushed deep red as the implications of what Colbert had just suggested sank in. For a moment, he sat in stunned silence, his mouth opening and closing as if he couldn't find words for what he was experiencing. The audience had gone completely quiet, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented and deeply uncomfortable. Financial incentive, Tyson repeated slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. You think I'm in this for money? You think I've spent decades studying the universe, writing books to help people understand science, appearing on educational programs because I'm trying to get rich? Colbert sensed he had struck a nerve and pressed his advantage with ruthless efficiency. Well, you're not doing it for free, are you? How much do you make per speaking engagement, Neil? How much did your publisher pay you for your last book? How much does the Hayden Planetarium pay you to be their celebrity director? Tyson's hands were trembling visibly now. His breathing had become rapid and shallow, and there was a look in his eyes that suggested he was fighting an internal battle between his professional training and his human emotions. I could have made 10 times more money on Wall Street with my physics degree. I could have gone into private industry and made millions. I chose education and public service because I believe in the importance of scientific literacy. Oh, so you're a martyr now, Colbert's voice dripped with sarcasm. Saint Neil, sacrificing himself for the greater good of humanity. Tell me, how does it feel to be so much more enlightened than the rest of us mere mortals? The mocking tone and deliberate mischaracterization of everything Tyson had said finally pushed him past his breaking point. His face contorted with rage, and when he spoke, his voice was a roar that echoed through the studio and left the audience stunned into complete silence. Enough! Tyson shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. I have had enough of your deliberate distortions and bad faith attacks. You invited me here under false pretenses. You told my people this would be a discussion about my new book, about sharing the wonder of the cosmos with your audience. Instead, you've spent the entire time trying to tear down science itself. Colbert sat back in his chair, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of his mouth, as if he had accomplished exactly what he had set out to do. I'm just asking the questions that ordinary people want answered, Neil. If you can't handle a little pushback, maybe you shouldn't be on television. Pushback? Tyson was on his feet now, his voice rising to a level that made the audience collectively lean back in their seats. This isn't pushback. This is character assassination. You're not asking questions, you're making accusations. You're not seeking understanding, you're promoting ignorance and conspiracy theories. The studio had gone completely silent except for Tyson's voice, which carried a raw, emotional intensity that nobody had ever heard from him before. His usual measured educational tone had been replaced by something primal and deeply human. You want to know about financial incentives? Tyson continued, his voice breaking slightly. I'll tell you about financial incentives. I turned down lucrative consulting contracts to work on science education. I spend my weekends at schools and underserved communities talking to kids who might never otherwise meet a scientist. I answer thousands of emails from people who have genuine questions about the universe, and I do it for free because I believe that knowledge belongs to everyone. Colbert's smirk was beginning to fade as he realized that Tyson's explosion was far more intense than he had anticipated. Neil, maybe you should sit down and— No, I will not sit down. Tyson cut him off, his voice now hoarse from shouting. You have spent this entire interview trying to undermine public trust in science. Do you have any idea what that does? Do you understand the consequences of what you're promoting? Tyson turned to address the audience directly, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and desperate sincerity. When people lose faith in science, they stop vaccinating their children. They ignore climate change. They reject medical treatments that could save their lives. They make decisions based on fear and superstition instead of evidence and reason. His voice cracked completely as he continued. I have spent my entire adult life trying to combat that ignorance, trying to show people the beauty and wonder of the universe we actually live in. And you sit there and mock that effort. You twist it into something selfish and elitist. You turn education into indoctrination. Colbert was clearly uncomfortable now, perhaps realizing that his calculated provocation had unleashed something far more powerful than he had intended. Neil, I think you're overreacting. Overreacting? Tyson's voice reached a pitch that seemed to make the studio walls vibrate. You just accused me of being a con artist, of exploiting people's trust for personal gain. You suggested that everything I've worked for, everything I believe in, is just a scam to line my pockets. And you think I'm overreacting? Tears were streaming down Tyson's face now, his composure completely shattered. I became an astrophysicist because I was a kid from the Bronx who fell in love with the stars. I wanted to understand how the universe works, and I wanted to share that understanding with other people. That's it. That's the entire story. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more impact than his shouting had. I never wanted to be famous. I never wanted to be wealthy. I just wanted to help people see that we're all connected to the cosmos in the most profound way possible. We're made of star stuff, Stephen. The calcium in our bones, the iron in our blood, the carbon in our DNA. It all came from the hearts of dying stars, billions of years ago. Tyson wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, his breathing still labored. That's not a political statement. That's not an opinion. That's not a conspiracy to control people's minds. That's just the truth about where we come from and what we're made of. And if you find that threatening, if you think that knowledge is somehow dangerous, then I feel sorry for you. The studio remained completely silent as Tyson gathered himself, straightening his jacket and running his hands through his hair. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but carried an undercurrent of profound disappointment. I thought we were going to have a conversation about the universe, Stephen. I thought we were going to talk about black holes and exoplanets and the search for life beyond Earth. I thought we were going to inspire people to look up at the night sky and feel wonder instead of fear. He looked directly at Colbert, his eyes, still red from crying, but now filled with a deep sadness rather than anger. Instead, you chose to attack the very foundation of human knowledge. You chose to promote suspicion and distrust instead of curiosity and understanding. That's not just disappointing. It's dangerous. Tyson walked back to his chair, but didn't sit down. I've appeared on hundreds of television shows, Stephen. I've talked to audiences around the world. And in all that time, I've never encountered anything like what you've done here tonight. This isn't journalism. It's not entertainment. It's not even good television. It's just cruel. Colbert finally seemed to realize that he had pushed too far, that his calculated provocation had revealed something ugly about his own motivations. Neil, I didn't mean to. Yes, you did, Tyson cut him off, his voice now steady but filled with quiet authority. Everything you've said tonight was calculated and deliberate. You knew exactly what you were doing, and you did it anyway. The question is why? Without waiting for an answer, Tyson turned and walked toward the edge of the stage, leaving Colbert sitting alone at his desk in stunned silence. The audience remained frozen, unsure whether to applaud, boo, or simply sit in shocked silence. As Tyson reached the edge of the stage, he turned back one final time. Science doesn't need your approval, Stephen. The universe doesn't care about your politics or your ratings or your personal agenda. The stars will keep shining, the planets will keep orbiting, and the laws of physics will keep operating exactly as they always have, regardless of whether you choose to believe in them or not. And with that, Neil deGrasse Tyson walked off the stage, leaving behind one of the most shocking and emotionally raw moments in late-night television history. The confrontation between Neil deGrasse Tyson and Stephen Colbert revealed something profound about the current state of discourse in America, where even the most basic scientific facts have become politicized and weaponized. What started as what should have been a routine educational interview spiraled into something far more significant, a window into the deep cultural divisions that are tearing at the fabric of rational discussion. If you want to see more breakdowns of moments that changed television forever, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And let me know in the comments, do you think Colbert went too far? Or was Tyson's reaction over the top? What would you have done in that situation?